Gardening from the ground up with Corey, Brad, and Cody.
Well, we finally made it to planting time for our warm season crops. Arkansas's average date of the last spring frost ranges from about March 20th in South Arkansas to April 20th in North Arkansas. And remember, that's just an average. It's not unheard of to have a frost in May in areas of northern Arkansas. If you've reached your area's last average frost date, check the 14-day forecast, and if it looks like the overnight lows won't dip below 40, you're probably safe. However, it's also not wise to plant into a cold soil either. Plants may not die, but they tend to be stunted from then on due to slowed growth or nutrient deficiencies associated with cold soil temps. By now, we've tilled our garden a few more times to reduce the vegetation and lawn grasses that were there. But to knock out the remainder, we applied a light rate of glyphosate to clean up the rest. 2 to 3 fluid ounces per gallon of at least 41% active ingredient glyphosate in a small pump-up sprayer will do the job. It's no threat to your incoming plants as long as it's applied before seed or transplants go in the ground. If you don't want to spray, do everything possible to remove as much of that vegetation manually by hand pulling, hoeing, or raking. All of that competition is a bad thing for your new vegetable plants. Once the soil prep is all complete, then it's time to plant. Planting takes planning. First and foremost, figure out which vegetables you want to grow. We chose the usual suspects: tomatoes, peppers, squash, and sweet corn. Seeds and transplants are readily available at big box garden centers or local nurseries. Some plants are more commonly planted directly as seeds, such as corn and okra, and some are more readily available as small plants, known as transplants, that are already a few weeks old. For the new gardener, we'd recommend planting the hardier transplants when possible. Starting your own seed indoors weeks ahead of planting is a great skill to learn, but we'll save that for another time. The size of your garden, as mentioned in episode 1, is going to play a huge part in what vegetables you grow and how many plants you have room for. Overcrowding often results in reduced yield, but on the other hand, you want to make the most efficient use of the space you have. This is where some graph paper and our home garden vegetable fact sheets come in handy. The 2 main items to look for are plant spacing, which is the distance between plants within the row, and row spacing, which is the distance between rows. This will also give you an idea on how many plants or seeds to purchase. Let's look at that. For our own garden, the only thing we'll grow from seed will be our sweet corn. And let's account for that first in our planting. Corn gets tall and can shade plants from harsh afternoon sun. But we need that sun in the morning to dry plants off to avoid diseases. So we're going to put our corn rows on the west side of our garden. And corn, to get the best pollination, should be planted in multiple short rows as opposed to 1 or 2 long rows. Our handy fact sheet on sweet corn tells us to shoot for 36 inches between rows. We'll sow our corn, and once it pops up, we'll thin it down to approximately 12 inches between each new seedling. If you only intend to eat the corn fresh from the garden, it's a good idea to plant a couple of rows per week over the course of 3 to 4 weeks. That way, the ears will not ripen all at once, and you'll have fresh corn over a period of time. If you intend to preserve it, it makes sense to plant it all at the same time, so it'll all ripen at the same time. Some folks are real particular about straight rows. If that's you, some wooden stakes and string will help you with that. Our fact sheet tells us that corn likes to be planted about 1 to 1.5 inches deep. To plant, use a hoe to open a shallow trench, the length of the row. Drop the seed in along the trench and then cover it, firming it up lightly with the flat side of the hoe. Don't compact it too tightly though. Then lightly water it in. For our transplanted plants, we'll again refer to each veggie's respective fact sheet on spacing. Since we don't have a lot of space there below the corn, among the peppers, tomatoes, and squash, the peppers need the least space, so we'll stick them there. The whole east side of the garden is free for our tomatoes and squash, and they need a lot of room. Squash need about 4 feet on each side to develop into big, robust plants. Tomatoes generally like a couple of feet between plants and about 3 feet between rows. When planting transplants, always remove plastic or paper pots and crack peat pots to allow roots to grow easily and unrestricted into the soil. Dig a small hole in the soil. Carefully remove the transplant from its container, dirt and all, and place it in the hole. Then reuse what's left to refill with the soil you took out. Next, a starter solution helps plants grow quickly. Make a solution by mixing 1 tablespoon of a soluble fertilizer such as a 10-20-10 in 1 gallon of water. Pour 1 cup of this solution around each plant as you set it out. This will give them an early boost, and the water will help push out any air pockets, helping the transplant to settle into its new home. And don't transplant into a really wet garden. It's a mess for you, and those new baby transplants don't want to be soggy. In our next episode, we'll cover some basic do's and don'ts for our new garden. Things like basic care and maintenance, like watering, and insect and disease control.